the air with, in case you haven't heard, folks, election night in America, or at least a few key states. And we're going to get our first look at actual data, real numbers on exit polls in just a couple of minutes from now. How voters feel about the economy, President Trump, what it could all mean for 2026 and control of Congress. We've got Steve Kornacki at the big board to break it all down. Again, that's coming in literally maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes. Stay with us. Plus, in Washington, back home there, the tiny sliver of optimism that maybe, just maybe, the government shutdown won't actually last forever. And the new pretty grim warning from the transportation secretary about what could happen if Congress can't find common ground.
You will see mass chaos. You will see mass flight delays. You'll see mass cancellations.
More on that in just a moment, plus a quick look at the day's other big headlines, including a possible break in the mysterious case of the missing 9-year-old girl we've been telling you about. That's coming up a little bit later in the show. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and we are coming on the air tonight just 2 hours before the first set of polls close in some of those crucial races across the country tonight, with that exit poll data just about to roll in less than 30 minutes from now. Election night is here officially, and in these 4 blue states, a first temperature check of the Trump administration so far, from the state of Virginia and the big governor's race there, that poll closes, those polls close 7 o'clock Eastern, 2 hours, to the high-profile New York City mayoral election. You've got some super interesting and maybe super specific dynamics in that city. We're going to get into it. And then what's expected to be the most suspenseful race of the night in New Jersey, the governor's race there. And even though President Trump is not on the ballot in any of these instances, he is certainly on the mind of voters. Listen.
I think with Trump being president, there's been a lot of political shift and divide.
This might not be a presidential election, but in some ways, we can make change by showing up.
I understand that Mr. Trump is a New Yorker. He has interest here. He has property here. I think a lot of people would have preferred that he keep his mouth shut, but he didn't.
So that's the voters. What about you and your viewer's guide for tonight? Let's crack it open. What we're looking for, what you may want to look for over the course of the next 6-7 hours or so. First of all, if polls bear out and Democrats do win tonight in these 3-4 key races, how big is the win? What are those margins? If that happens, if there's a through line we could carry out to 2026, it may be on the economy, the messaging on affordability, which is present in all of these races in different ways. And then there's this question of the Trump coalition that he built in 2024. Does that hold over to an off-year election when he is not on the ballot, especially in a state like New Jersey, where Latinos, for example, showed up big for him? Are they going to turn out this year? We've got our teams spread out across all of these key states, New Jersey, New York, Virginia, and beyond. I want to start with Stephanie Gosk, who is in East Brunswick, New Jersey, for us tonight. And Steph, truly, if there is a race where there's a huge question mark, and there's question marks in all these races, but where polling shows maybe the tightest battle, it is in the state that you are standing right now and this governor's race. Talk me through what you've been hearing from the candidates, from voters, as you've been on the ground today.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the important thing, Hallie, is to remember that in the presidential election, there was a huge swing in this state towards Donald Trump. And now you have Mikey Sherrill. We're at her headquarters here in East Brunswick. She is the favorite in this race. She is the Democrat in this race, former Navy pilot, Congresswoman. If she doesn't win tonight, that's a really big deal. The margin is super narrow. And when you go back to that presidential election, one of the key groups, one of the key demographics was Latinos. And you see Jack Chiarelli, who's a Republican running for office, you see him throughout this campaign going to places to appeal to that vote. And that's where Donald Trump made inroads. And he made inroads on the issue of affordability. But what Mikey Sherrill is hoping is that in the last 11 months, he has not held up his side of the bargain. Listen to what she said to me today when we caught up with her in Montclair, New Jersey, which is where she lives. She had just finished voting herself.
We saw a 10-point swing to the right here in New Jersey last year, and I think that was largely based on the president's statements that he was going to lower costs for people, and yet they've gone up exponentially. So that is really central in voters' minds. It's what I've heard about from thousands of people that I speak to, and that's why I'm certainly focused on it.
So the polls are close within the margin of error, and most of them, it will very largely depend on the enthusiasm of the Democrats in this state. And that could be kind of the bellwether issue that this state could represent for the country at large when you look forward to the midterm elections, Hallie.
And when you look at there's always a caution, we'll get into this more, Steph, about not over-extrapolating, right? But what happens in New Jersey is fascinating for those reasons you've laid out. There have also been, I think, some question marks, and we should just mention this briefly, some bomb threats that shut down some locations. It sounds like that was nothing to be overly concerned about earlier, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was alarming in their early hours this morning. 7 counties with bomb threats to a number of polling locations. The Attorney General putting out a press release saying that law enforcement went to all of those locations, did search for any explosives. In some cases, they had to shift the opening times and locations for some of those places, but they haven't determined that it was a credible threat at all. In Bergen County, they said that it actually looked computer generated. I also should mention that there was one arrest made of a juvenile who had sent threats apparently through his cell phone using text messages, but that is not linked to what happened earlier in the day. Again, no credible threat, and it doesn't seem to have gotten in the way of any of the voting today, Hallie.
Stephanie Goss, live for us there in New Jersey, starting us off tonight. Steph, thank you very much. Let's take you to Virginia now, that big governor's race there. With polls closing, that's going to be the first one where we'll see votes start to come in. And Kornacki will be over at the big board for that, where you've got former Democratic Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger up against the Republican Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earl-Sears to try to become the Commonwealth's first woman governor. This is a state that historically has served as kind of a barometer of how voters feel towards whoever is sitting in the White House. Ryan Nobles on the ground in Richmond, Virginia, knows why that is. And Ryan, it's because Virginia has this quirk. They vote on the governor a year after these presidential races. And in 11 of the last 12 races, it has gone the other way of the presidential race, right? In other words, if a Republican's in the White House, it's been a Democratic governor, with the exception of one. We'll talk about that with Terry McAuliffe later on in the show. But the dynamics here are fascinating, especially when you look at where the polling has been. That this seems like it is maybe Abigail Spanberger's race to lose.
Yeah, that's right, Hallie. Virginia has historically always gone opposite the way of the White House in the previous election cycle. In fact, when a Republican has occupied the White House, Virginia hasn't voted for a Republican for governor since back in the 70s. And you're right to point out that one outlier in that span when Terry McAuliffe won back in 2013. And so that's part of the reason that Democrats feel emboldened about their chances here tonight, but also because this is a state, while it is purple, it is trending more blue. And there was obviously the election 4 years ago where Glenn Youngkin very much surprised many voters by running a strong showing kind of in the wake of the COVID pandemic, running against somebody like Terry McAuliffe, who'd already been in office. And Virginia voters were looking for a different, a fresh face. So this time around, Democrats seemingly have gotten their act together. They have really focused in on some of these key issues that specifically impact Virginians in terms of affordability, the economy, and, of course, the impact of the government shutdown. And Spanberger has found a way to make that message resonate with everyday voters. Of course, we still have to see those returns come in, but poll after poll shows she should be in a very strong position to win here tonight, Hallie.
Talk us through about the lieutenant governor's messaging here, too, because she has leaned more into the culture war issues, perhaps, than her opponent. Pull on that thread for us, especially when it comes to the current governor, Glenn Youngkin, and the non-endorsement from President Trump so far. How much has that been a factor, at least in folks that you're talking to down there in Richmond?
Well, I mean, there's certainly going to be a strategy question that Republicans are going to have to ask themselves, depending on how this election turns. And that is that Winsome Earl-Sears has leaned heavily into the transgender message. It was something that was very effective for President Trump a year ago, while Abigail Spanberger has instead focused on the economy and specifically the government shutdown. And while most of these races are specifically local races with local impacts, this one is a little bit different because the shutdown is a local issue because there's so many federal government workers. And so Spanberger's made that her message, while Winsome Earl-Sears has been focusing on these cultural issues. We'll have to see what Virginia voters think about those messaging when we get those
know, Ryan, because just into us, it's 5:09. We're getting our very first look at some of the exit poll data out of Virginia. I want to pull it back up on the screen. We showed it while you were talking. Let me walk folks through it here. The most important issue to Virginia voters. It is unsurprising, perhaps, Ryan, that almost half of them say the economy was the most important issue to them. 49%. Ryan, that is far and away blowing the next most important issue, healthcare, out of the water here. And I say it is perhaps unsurprising because we consistently see voters say that the economy is, if not then one of the biggest issues for them. And this is something that Abigail Spanberger has hammered hard. Even you've seen it in the ads where she has, linked, for example, Earl-Sears to President Trump. It's been around some of this economy messaging.
Yeah, and what's interesting when you show that that pie graph is that
pull it back up.
These cultural issues that has made been the hallmark of the Republican campaign this time around are not even showing up. And I do have to say that is a marked difference from what we saw here 4 years ago. Glenn Youngkin really specifically honed in into parents' rights issues, especially in the wake of the COVID pandemic, because there were so many Virginia families that were frustrated that it took so long for Virginia schools to open. And he dovetailed that in to the transgender issue as well. So Winston Rosier's in many ways tried to play and use the same playbook this time around, and except tripled down on it in many ways. Almost all of her ads and messaging were focused on that, where Spanberger's messaging was all specifically about the economy, pushing back on the Trump administration and the way that they've operated the shutdown and the hard impact it had been on federal workers that live in Virginia. Hallie.
Ryan Nobles, thank you very much. Rolling with the Sierras. Those exit polls are just starting to come in. Ryan, thank you. I know you'll stay close to a camera. We've also got to talk about where we're sitting right now, New York City, in a race that has captivated not just New Yorkers, but people all across the country. Rahima Ellis is joining us now on this. And this is Andrew Cuomo, Zohran Mamdani, both of them locked in this race. It appears to be Mamdani's to lose. If you look at where the numbers are, clearly has the advantage when it comes to recent polling here. Obviously, Mamdani won the primary over his competitors here. Andrew Cuomo is trying to mount this push to try to take him down. Talk us through the landscape on the ground where you are. I should note, by the way, we don't have exits in from New York yet. When we get them, we're going to break them here on the air. Rahima.
Hallie, so many people were talking to Andrew Cuomo when he was in the primary, and they thought that he was not running a campaign that was worthy of his opponent. And one of the reasons that Cuomo is no longer on the Democratic ticket, but he's running as an independent, is because he lost that Democratic primary. And one of the reasons that he said he was going to stay in the race, he says because only 13% of the eligible voters in that primary came out and actually voted. So he had, in his mind, some room to grow. This particular time around, now that we are in the thick of the campaign and we're up to Election Day, he has been campaigning strongly. He has been going after his opponent, the number one opponent, and that is Mamdani. He's gotten some endorsements from people, even some he didn't want, including the president, Donald Trump. Listen to what he says about that endorsement.
The president does not support me. The president opposes Zohran Mamdani. The president believes Zohran Mamdani is a communist. He believes he's an existential threat.
Whether any of that is true, one of the things I should share with you is just a snapshot of the word from some voters that I talked to just about 15 miles from here, north of Midtown Manhattan. And it was at a polling place in a community that has black, white, Hispanic, and Jewish voters. I've been doing this a long time, and many of them were 50-50 and said 50% wanted or voted for Cuomo, and 50% voted for Mamdani. Hallie?
Rahima Ellis, thank you very much. We do have one of those new New York City exit polls in. Let me pull this up as we get ready to bring in Sam Brock now, who's at the Mamdani headquarters. Sam, let me pull this up. It's literally coming into us. I haven't even seen it yet, but it looks like it is perhaps, and the control room is going to tell me on the reason for your mayoral vote here and how much Donald Trump was or was not a factor when New York City voters went out to the polls. So you can see it here. About 59% of New York City voters say Donald Trump, the president, was not a factor in casting their vote. About 30% voted, they say, in opposition to the president, 8% in support of President Trump. What's interesting here, Sam, is that Zohran Mamdani did not make this a referendum on the anti-Trump sentiment in New York City. He again and again made it a referendum on affordability and on cost of living. And that that was something he was laser focused on throughout his campaign.
I was going to say the same thing. The pie chart that you just showed a second ago, Hallie, really demonstrates that Mamdani's appeal, his sort of magnetic social media campaign that has galvanized people all over New York City, was based on the idea that I feel your pain. It was not necessarily a theoretical or intellectual exercise. It was the idea that people are feeling looked over, that $4,000 a month or more for rent. Obviously, that's a lot in New York City, but it is extrapolatable to other cities around the country. People that are in the working class feeling like they just don't have enough to get by. Well, while wealthy Americans seem to have a way in. That was sort of the thrust of his campaign, and it absolutely brought more people into the fold. At least 100,000 new voters just since the primary in New York City. That was Mamdani's appeal. Of course, Trump, you mentioned a second ago, has really tried to put his thumb on the scale of this race, most recently in the last 12 hours, by saying that voters should vote for Cuomo just so there is a blocked path for Mamdani. That's how strongly he feels against the Democratic Socialist. So to see that Donald Trump was not sort of like an animating reason behind a lot of those early voters does, at least to me, tell me that Mamdani is faring well in that sense. I would also add, though, that President Trump has threatened to withhold funding from New York City. That's about 10% of the city's budget if Mamdani is elected. I asked him earlier today, does Trump have the constitutional authority to do something like that? Here's what he told me.
The president makes threat after threat that has nothing to do with what's actually within the bounds of the law. And it is time that we start treating his threats as what they are. These are threats not only to New Yorkers, threats also to our democracy. And it's time to have a mayor who will fight these threats, not accept them as if they are law by virtue of who's saying them.
Hallie, as far as Mamdani's core pieces of his platform, universal child care is the biggest one, certainly the most expensive, with an estimated cost of $6 billion. But certainly most folks across the country have also heard about the rent freezes and the free buses. Most of those, the mechanisms for paying for it would be through tax increases he's talked about. That requires the help of the state legislature. So there are guardrails here. It's not like Mr. Mamdani can just shift wealth in the city of New York, the financial capital of the world. That's one of the ongoing conversation points, but it's important to keep that in the back of your mind as we watch the results come in later tonight.
Sam Brock, live for us there in Brooklyn. We'll be coming back to you throughout the night. Sam, thank you very much. Listen, we talked about these key state races playing out. There's more to it. If you look out west, in the West in California, big fight to control the balance of power in Congress that is taking center stage there, and that could have big consequences for the midterms, maybe for years to come. California battleground polls are going to close 6 hours from now. That's later on tonight, right? We'll be looking at Virginia and Jersey and New York before then. Prop 50 is on the ballot, right? This would temporarily redraw congressional maps in favor of Democrats, which could give them up to 5 more House seats. Why are they doing it? Think about what just happened in Texas, right? President Trump led this push for redistricting in that state, Texas, adding what could amount to 5 more House seats there, friendly to Republicans. It is all part of this redistricting arms race that is happening not just in those 2 states, but coast to coast as well, escalating, et cetera. Take a look at this nationwide sort of map. You can see it here. Some places have had new maps signed into law. Some places have had moves to try to redistrict. In some states, they're talking about it. For example, I want to bring in Liz Kreutz, who's following all of this from California. Prop 50, again, this is one where there has been a lot of energy, a lot of momentum on the Democratic side here, on the yes side, if you will, in order to erase as many as 5 Republican districts effectively. And California Governor Gavin Newsom is the face of this in a big way, Liz.
He really is, and he is poised to have a pretty big night, Hallie. Right now, polling shows that this is likely to pass by pretty wide numbers. I think the support that Democrats are seeing for this proposition has even surprised some Democrats. Polling shows it's very much down party line right now, with Democrats supporting Prop 50, Republicans not supporting it. That said, even among Democrats, there are many that are wrestling with whether to vote for it, because currently in California, you have this independent bipartisan committee that draws the congressional lines. It is extraordinarily popular, and this would erase that. Take a listen to what some voters said.
I'm hesitant because while I understand the strategy, it's not very different from saying, well, they did it, so can we? And it really starts to undermine the very fabric of what our democracy is built upon.
I realize the game that's being played nationally, and I supported it.
And it seems like a lot of Democrats are ultimately siding with that gentleman there. Hallie, $120 million was raised in just over 2 months in support of this proposition, so much so that last week Governor Newsom's team put out a statement saying, you can stop donating. We've reached our fundraising goals, which is something you really hardly ever see. And so what it seems is that Governor Newsom's messaging, telling people this is about more than California, this is about pushing back against the Trump administration, has really been effective here. And we'll see tonight. But it does seem like it's poised to pass, Hallie.
Liz Kreutz, live for us there in California. Liz, thank you. I'm leaning over because guess who's just walked into the studio here, and that is Steve Kornacki, posted up at the big board. We're so glad to have you tonight, and every night as always, Steve, as we're starting to get a look now for the first time at some of these critical exit polls. Tell us what's standing out to you and to the team.
Yeah, getting sort of our first look at the electorates in the states or the city, as in the case in New York City. Show you one thing here we've been looking at and talking about is the Trump factor. You know, is he factoring in to the results here? So we've got his approval rating per the exit poll in the states that are voting and in New York City. Now, keep in mind, we're talking about blue states and certainly a very blue city like New York City. But here's how the public is saying, the voters today, I should say, are saying they view the president. In Virginia, a 41% job approval rating for him. And keep in mind, by the way, in our NBC national poll that just came out this week, Trump was at 43% nationally. So 41% in the electorate in Virginia that we're seeing, 43% in New Jersey, much lower in New York City. It's the bluest of these four venues, 29%. And then California, where that redistricting battle is playing out, 36% for Trump. Also, in these two states, Virginia and New Jersey, these were both states that went for Kamala Harris last year. Trump got about 46% of the vote in both of these states last year. So his approval rating tracking a little bit below where he did. So just in terms of Trump's standing, and then in terms of Trump being a factor potentially in people's votes, take a look at this. Looking in New Jersey here, you can, let me see if I can get that up. There it is. New Jersey, and we asked about Trump as a reason for your vote. And 38% of voters in New Jersey said opposing Trump was the main reason for their vote in the race for governor. A much smaller share, 13% say supporting Trump was. And you see there a plurality of 47 say Trump not a factor. But that's a huge number when you think about it, Hallie. In a governor's race, to have nearly 40% of the electorate saying it's the president who is deciding their vote in terms of who's going to run the state capitol. And this is something we'll see as these results come in. The Mikey Sherrill campaign, the Democratic campaign here, has really tried to tie Jack Ciattarelli to Trump. And there are some places in the state that Ciattarelli did well in 4 years ago and that Trump did terribly in. And we'll see if the Sherrill campaign has succeeded in taking those places and making them sort of off limits to Ciattarelli this time around.
And just noting, obviously, early exits, we want to put all the right caveats and grains of salt around that. But if you're Mikey Sherrill's campaign, you want to be seeing these kinds of numbers as opposed to the opposite. Fair?
Yeah. Listen, their strategy was the more this is about Trump, the better they think they're going to do.
There was also a fair amount of economy messaging as well. I mean, that was something that you heard about even in conversations on the sort of strategist side on both campaigns. The messaging around the economy, the messaging around cost of living was huge. What are we seeing from the exits there? And I know, again, Steve, I know your board is like live populating as we speak, but just kind of roll with me here.
Well, I showed you Virginia, so why don't we show you New Jersey? Why don't we show you Virginia here? Just looking at the top issues, and yes, you could see here the economy. Half the voters in Virginia said it's the economy that's the top issue. Them. Another 21% talked about health care, costs around that. So that's between these two issues there. That's more than 2/3 of the electorate. That is 70% citing one of those two issues in Virginia as their top concern. And seeing the economy pop up like that in New Jersey as well.
Taxes, people say it was super critical to them, obviously, how much the cost of living was. Is there anything else on the board here, Steve, as this is, again, and just so viewers understand, like this stuff is coming in as we're chatting. So it's populating here in the graphics for Steve. Is there anything else that's jumping out to you, pal? Anything that's surprising you so far at this early moment tonight?
No, and I could just, I put up, you said taxes in New Jersey, taxes in the economy right there. And yeah, we are just waiting as more of this sort of comes in. But the good news, Hallie, is in less than 90 minutes, the votes are real.
Then you actually get actual numbers and data to talk about. What's the first county you're going to be looking to in Virginia, Steve?
Well, I think we're going to we certainly got in the presidential election, Loudoun County, which is in northern Virginia. And in the presidential election last year, Loudoun County was the one that told people Trump had been elected president because he had so vastly outperformed how he had done there back in 2020. And it's something we then saw in counties like it nationally. I think we're going to get those numbers from Loudoun pretty early again. And I think that's going to give us a pretty good immediate idea how things are going in Virginia.
Do we need to plug Kornacki Cam? I think we do, because we've got Kornacki Cam rolling tonight right here on NBC News.
It's better they don't tell me about that.
I love it. Steve, thank you. I know you're going to be hanging there. Hang tight for a sec. We want to get to somebody who's very familiar with an election night like this, a gubernatorial election, and that is somebody who served as a governor of North Carolina, former Republican governor there, Pat McCrory. Gov, thanks for being on the show again. Really appreciate your time.
It's great seeing you again. Thank you very much.
Of course. So you've had this unique perspective where you've run in these kinds of races. You've seen the dynamics of these kinds of races. You just heard Steve walk through some of the key exit polls we're seeing. As we look ahead to polls closing in Virginia and New Jersey, what's the biggest thing that you are watching for here?
I think the biggest thing is what the survey showed is the connection to President Trump in an off-year election. That impacts his approval rating, may impact the election in addition to turnout. And what we've seen with Barack Obama and Donald Trump is the turnout of their supporters isn't as high during an off-year election. So turnout's going to be very interesting in these elections and who gets the vote out. Virginia is becoming, or North Carolina is becoming very much like Virginia too, where the urban areas are all blue, the rural areas are all red, and the suburbs are going to make the difference. What we used to call the soccer moms may make the difference. And there are certain issues that swing the soccer moms. Some of them now are the social issues, like the transgender vote. The transgender issue, which has become quite controversial during the past decade, it's kind of flipped. But then there are other issues regarding foreign policy and even the staff issues and the closing of government could have a big impact on this election also. What people lose their flights the day before election could impact people votes.
You talk about how you're watching, obviously, the Trump factor in this, and we've seen some of those exit polls already suggesting that is at least part of some of these voters' decision-making process, more as we're seeing, as Steve just laid out in New Jersey, in opposition to the president. You've said, in reference to your 2022, I think, your Senate run, you said, we learned in my last Senate race that if you're running as a Republican and you do not get President Trump's endorsement, Donald Trump's endorsement, you don't have a chance. Do you think that is...
I'm the example that when I announced for U.S. Senate, I had a 30-point lead. My approval rating among Republicans in my state was over 90%. By the end of the election, right after the Trump endorsement by now Senator Ted Budd, I dropped to 40% approval, and I lost the election by over 20%. So I was the first example, especially after January 6th, where it showed that Trump still had a tremendous amount of power. So the dilemma the Republicans have is in the primary, you have to be with them 100%. The dilemma is, how does that impact the independent vote? Because right now in New Jersey, Virginia, and in the future North Carolina, there are more independent voters now than Republicans and Democrats. They are losing their voter base, the two parties, and more people are registering independent in most states at this point in time. And that's a clear message that most people are seeing both parties failing the American people, especially with the shutdown. You know, the debate is who's to blame, and I think a lot of people are blaming both parties.
In just about 90 minutes, we're going to get a look here at, for example, in Virginia, once those polls closed, independents, how they broke here. To your point, I wonder on this issue of the Donald Trump endorsement here. Obviously, he has backed in New Jersey, Jack Ciattarelli, stopping short of backing in Virginia the Lieutenant Governor, Winsome Earl-Sears, after they had, in that 2022 era, which you remember so well, he called her a phony after she said that he was a liability, but then recanted and then backed him, et cetera. A complicated relationship, I think it is fair to say, to the point where at his tele-rally last night in support of her, he didn't mention her name once. Governor, how do you see that?
That's the unique dynamic of President Trump now. 1 minute you're in, the next minute you're out, but sometimes you're back in. And then in Virginia, we've got the uniqueness of the Attorney General's race is actually impacting the governor's race, which is very unique. It's very similar to in North Carolina, the last election, where we had a controversial gubernatorial candidate, Mark Robinson, and that dragged down the Republicans in other races. So you never know where the dynamics might go. And it's usually a local dynamic that may impact a statewide election.
Let's talk about redistricting, too, because we just heard from our California correspondent there, Liz Croytz, talking about Prop 50 in the West. North Carolina is obviously one of the states that is working on redistricting as well, redrawing congressional maps.
No, they've done it.
They did it, right. They got that through. How do you see this playing out in sort of the national arms race, if you will, when it comes to redistricting? And what are the consequences of that longer term?
I think the American people have seen this going on for decades. It's been around all my life. It's just more obvious. In fact, here in Charlotte, we have local elections right now, and the Democrats, a blue city where I used to be mayor for 14 years, it's all blue, and it's gerrymandered for the Democrats. In fact, we're trying to win one at-large seat as Republicans. But in the state races, the Senate and House and the state, and now the congressional is all Republican. Both are contrary to the balance in the city of Charlotte for Republicans and to the Democrats in state races. So both parties are manipulating the system the best they can. And it's been more exposed now than ever before because of the Texas, California, and now North Carolina will be one congressional seat, which is going to be expanded to Republican. That's if it goes as planned. Sometimes the experts miscalculate redistricting a seat and move one area to another area. You might end up losing one or two seats that you weren't expecting. You never know based upon the dynamics of election. Sometimes the experts are wrong when drawing lines, which are now, by the way, since I got into politics, are being drawn by computers.
Governor Pat McCrory, former governor, that sometimes we know both computers and experts can sometimes be wrong. That is for sure. Governor, thank you very much for being with us on a big and busy night here on NBC. Appreciate it.
You take care.
Much more to get to here on the show because we've got those exit polls, as we told you, rolling in. Listen, it is early data, obviously, but it is still at least data 90 minutes before polls close in the first key state tonight, the state of Virginia, as you're taking a live look at one of those polling locations. We've got our team with us. We're going to come back in just about 2 minutes with much more right after this break. We are back with our continuing coverage here of election night in these 4 critical states and beyond here on NBC News. We've got that exit poll data just coming into us on some of those big races around the country. You've heard us talk about the economic impact. You've heard us talk about the Trump factor in some of these places. But the first read really on how voters are feeling here. I want to bring in now Christine Romans, our senior business correspondent, who is joining us now. And Christine, you know, we look at a place like New Jersey. You look at a place like Virginia, and I would say maybe more New Jersey, something like the cost of electricity, the spiking price in electricity in that state became I don't want to call it a sleeper campaign issue because nobody's sleeping on it, but it certainly became in some ways front and center in this campaign.
And the exit polls show that's the top concern among Democrats and Republicans in the state. Like the electricity is a really big problem here. For Democrats, health care also makes their list as well. But, you know, also, you're seeing Virginia there. How did federal government job cuts affect your finances? Obviously, that's going to be a bigger deal in Virginia because right there in the proximity of the federal government. But over in New Jersey, it's just the grinding cost of living. High tax state, high property tax state, and everything from childcare to groceries costs a little bit more.
Stand by for 1 second, Christine. I want to bring in 2 of our panelists who have joined us over here on set. I hope I can bring you in. I think we have the camera ready for you. We've got Hogan Gidley, Ashley Etienne. Great to see you both. Thank you so much. Can we pull back up? Christine referenced it here, this Virginia exit poll. So again, just to remind people, this stuff is coming in live as we speak. So they're popping it up. The graphics are coming up because it's interesting. It is our first real sense of where voters are today, in addition to obviously what we've heard from voters on the ground, from our correspondents who are in the field. How do the federal government cuts affect your finances? This is Virginia specific. This is a reference to those so-called RIFs, those layoffs in the federal government put in place under the Trump administration. And you can see here that, you know, more than half of voters said it's in some way affected your pocketbook, what the president has done and his team here. And why this is interesting here, and Ash, I'll go to you on this. You look at something like Northern Virginia. You look at the area around Hampton Roads, which obviously has a bigger military population. Virginia has something like 147,000 federal civilian employees, right? Second most in the country. This is a place where those impacts are outsized. In other words, if this were a race in, I don't know, Rhode Island, we maybe wouldn't be talking about the impact of federal government cuts.
No, that's absolutely right. And I think what's interesting, and if you look at both of these exit polls, the majority of voters are concerned about economic issues, from health care to energy costs. I mean, all of it, 86%. I was just looking at the exit polls in New Jersey, for example, 86% is focused on the issues of the economy. And that's got to be if I'm Donald Trump and if I'm Republicans, that's got to be a frightening scenario. We just recently were talking about the NBC polls where he's underwater on everything from the economy to corruption to democracy. I mean, almost every issue he's underwater on. And I think the issue, though, is there's no way to turn this thing around. Even if we open up the government, you're still going to have a situation where energy costs are high, grocery costs are high. He's not dealing or tackling any of those issues.
I'll let you jump in here. And as we do, I want to pull up this other brand new exit poll just coming into us that we're seeing out of Virginia with how you feel about your family's finances. 62% of voters felt like their family finances were holding steady, but about a quarter of voters felt like they are falling behind on that front. And Hogan, you know this has been central to the messaging here in both of these races.
First thing, Hallie, I noticed you said that
I saw you scribbling away, buddy.
Yeah,
I did.
I did. First thing I noticed you said this has been done by the president and his team, this shutdown. Not the case.
No, I didn't say the shutdown. The federal employee layoffs, the RIFs.
Right. when they're trying to focus on how they can make the government function for the American
Okay, but
people.
it still happened in the Trump administration.
Well, understandably so, when you can't keep the government open. As you know, the Democrats have voted now 14 times to keep the government closed. But I digress. Prices for gasoline have gone down to the lowest point in years under this president. There was a problem with eggs right off the bat with a bird flu of some kind. They fixed that. Prices are down for groceries as well. However, as you also know, one of the things the Democrats ran up against in the last election was trying to tell the American people, which is the most offensive thing you can do as a politician, tell the American people what they are feeling is not real. What they are seeing is not real.
But in this case,
they told us.
In this case, Democrats don't have to make it up. It's all in the polling. It's all in the data. I don't know. I'm not sure what universe you guys are living in. I just bought a quarter gallon of milk. Cost me $6. I mean, this is you know.
Let me just pause you guys there for 1 second. Ash, I don't want to interrupt you or you, but can I just, because the number, I want to explain what we're seeing on the screen here, because you've got 3 new polls coming in, 3 new exit polls, I should say, from data from today in these races. This is New Jersey. To Christine's point, teeing us all up on this here and what's important to voters there. We know that taxes was a big one, the economy. You saw the numbers in Virginia, very similar here in New Jersey. About a quarter feel like they're falling behind. 60+% think they're holding steady. Let me advance to the next one here, because I think there's another screen as well from our team who's handling exit polls on the economy in some of these key states. We've seen it in Virginia. We've seen it in New Jersey. And now the condition, this is like the state of the state's economy. This is another exit poll question that we asked. The condition of Jersey's economy, not so good. 40%, 42% think it's not so good. 36%, about a third of voters think that it's good. Go ahead and jump in, Christine.
I just want a couple of things.
And same question, by the way, for Virginia. You said about half of voters think good, third think not so good.
We're liking to see numbers. I'm going to give you some more numbers. So a number came out today from the National Association of Realtors that found first-time home buyer. The first-time home buyer, that's the path to the American dream, right? The median age is a record high 40.
Wow.
And of all the homes sold in the most recent quarter, only 21% went to first-time home buyers. That's never happened before. So that's the backdrop here. High child care costs, a housing market that you can't get into, and that's how you get kind of ahead. We still have a pretty durable labor market overall, but all this worry about AI and some, corporate jobs more recently, and then just the daily cost of living. The family finances are stretched. Hogan's absolutely right. Gas prices the lowest, I think, in maybe 4 years. The
stock market's doing great. Obviously,
the stock market's up 42% over the past year. But I look at electricity prices up 20% over the past 4 years. There's that old, the framing of are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? The cost of everything is up a lot over the past 4 years, except for gas.
We'll get back to the economy, too, but I want to bring in here the opinion of the Democratic Party for New Jersey voters, and we're going to see Virginia voters here as well. This is interesting. 50% unfavorable, 47% favorable on the opinion of the Democratic Party in Jersey. We've also got this in Virginia as well. Again, very similar numbers, just about half and half there. Ashley, what does that say to you?
It says that the Democratic Party has a lot of problems, and I think they recognize they have a lot of problems and challenges. They have been gaining
Republicans as well, which we'll get.
They have been gaining ground on the economy. The NBC poll showed recently that Republicans have lost more than 20 points on the economy, which is substantial because we usually, lose that debate and argument with Republicans on who's better on the economy. So they're doing better in certain areas. They're improving. But the reality is the question is whether or not that's soft support, whether or not that support is anti-Trump rather than pro-Democrat, and that's what these numbers are showing.
But also, let's not pretend as though Donald Trump is the author of the problems they are seeing in these states. They have governors in place. There's a reason Youngkin isn't all that popular in Virginia, and there's definitely a reason Murphy isn't all that popular.
In Virginia.
Well, I mean, that's what I'm saying. He's not like blowing it out of the park here, but you just pointed to the high tax rate, for example, in New Jersey. Those are state taxes. You just said it's the state of the state, talking about the polls that have come out. Right. And the state of the state is delivered by the governor at these state legislatures all the time. So there are controls here locally that are problematic that we're seeing on the ballot right now. And while we can talk about Trump being over all of this because he's the president of the United States and he looms large and they use him to their advantage or their detriment, depending on how the polls go in these different states, the fact is they are in control of a lot of their own destiny here, and they failed the voters and the electorate in these respective states.
Well, listen, we're going to see in about an hour and 20 minutes when some of the vote starts to come in. I'm going to let you get in here. But let me ask you then, Hogan, what is a good night for Republicans in your view? Don't sit here and tell me they're going to win. And,
they're not.
Necessarily, they could.
I don't think they're going to win a thing, actually, tonight. But that's not news. It would be news if a Republican won in a Democrat blue state.
So you're looking at margins.
I'm looking at margins to some degree because I think Trump, he lost Virginia by 5, he lost New Jersey by 6, which the fact they were even in play was a big shift by Donald Trump because he was able to get black males, he was able to get Hispanics, a majority of which voted for him. Those were big numbers. He's not on the ballot right now. These are different issues they're facing in these different states. So if it's close, fine, but Democrat states electing Democrat candidates is not news.
So here's the news. I mean, the reality is the president's always on the ballot. Here's what I think we'll be looking for, especially as Democrats, that turnout in southern southwest Virginia, those Republican strongholds in New Jersey, where he made inroads with Latino voters.
Sure.
The question is whether or not his coalition can hold. If his coalition doesn't hold, and the exit polls show that, which they are right now, that people are blaming the economy, which is the president's responsibility, they've got a big problem.
There are, I think, lessons that you could draw, depending how tonight goes. And I've been saying this, and I want to say it out loud. I don't know if I've said it out loud yet today on this show. Lessons you can draw to 2026. I mean, I think that's what everybody, it's election night. You got political nerds, political junkies looking at this. There is also a risk of over extrapolating lessons from today to next year, right? Like I do think that is a legitimate, when you look at these states, there are some dynamics that are very specific to Virginia, to New Jersey, certainly to New York City as well. And I wonder how you are thinking about this, because to me, it feels like one of the through lines could be, to your point here, Ashley, and to yours too, Hogan, and in Christine's wheelhouse, could be the messaging on cost of living and affordability here, if in fact there are big margins for Democrats in both of these gubernatorial races.
And a lot of this I don't know that we're going to see the effect of for a while. The big beautiful bill had the largest tax cuts in American history, really won't take effect until next year. Inflation's down, gas prices we talked about down, eggs are down. All those things are happening.
Inflation's roughly, I mean, it's ticked down a little bit, but just go ahead.
It's down, as I said. But how that affects this outcome in this election in these blue states, I don't know that it's going to matter at all, because as I said, the electorate largely doesn't like Donald Trump. They largely don't like Republicans at all. But the fact it's close may be kind of a news story. I just don't think it matters all that much.
Here's one polling data that you didn't focus on, Hallie, that I think is very important. Virginians are saying that they think the economy is going to get worse. That it's bad now. They're sitting on their money because they think it's going to actually get worse.
Federal workers.
So the reality is again, there is no path for the Republicans to improve the economy. There are no more bills that are coming down the pipe that actually would improve electricity costs, the cost for groceries, all of those things. And that is the real problem. But I will say, can I just say this? Yeah. What Democrats have to do, my advice and my recommendation to them, it's the day after the shutdown that's going to matter most. They need to come out with a proactive agenda almost immediately on the heels of the shutdown to draw this contrast between where the Republicans are taking the economy and what they would do very differently. They've got to get a proactive agenda so that they can start to draw the contrast.
Right now, it's only about hating Trump. I don't think that's going to get them far at all.
We are going to get a gut check, by the way, on the shutdown coming up in just a second, as it looks like there's maybe the first glimmer of hope that could end soon. We've been pulling up, by the way, these live exit poll results. You're seeing them on the ticker here on screen on NBC News now. And you're also taking a live look here at one of these New York City polling locations. Polls will close there 9 o'clock Eastern. We've got a big and busy night coming up. Our thanks to Christine Romans, who's going to be hanging out all night long, talking all things economy. As you've just heard, a big factor in all of these races. But when we get back, another look. Hogan sounds skeptical. Can't tell if Ashley's skeptical. Will this shutdown end maybe this week? And what does it mean for the holiday travel rush? The new grim warning and the prognosis from the Hill is next. So tonight we talked about maybe a sliver of hope on day 34 of this government shutdown as we barrel toward the longest one ever. We're going to hit that mark real soon, just hours from now. And there is, for the first time, a sense of optimism. I don't want to overstate it, but at least maybe a little bit of a sense of optimism that they could be getting close to figuring this out. But until that happens, you've got this travel mess that keeps popping up that could be shutdown related, going from bad to possibly worse, with this new warning from the transportation secretary that he may have to actually close some airspace soon.
If you bring us to a week from today, Democrats, you will see mass chaos. You will see mass flight delays. You'll see mass cancellations, and you may see us close certain parts of the airspace because we just cannot manage it because we don't have the air traffic controllers.
Secretary Duffy there, a new NBC News poll shows that more voters blame Republicans for all this rather than Democrats here, just ahead of obviously polls closing in tonight's elections. Sahil Kapoor has made his way, as we all have, up from Washington here to New York for election night. Two big sort of factors that have become pressure points now when it comes to this government shutdown: air travel and some of those delays we've been seeing that could be shutdown related, with an already understaffed air traffic control corps, trying to do their jobs. And then these SNAP benefits here. Start with us on SNAP, the food aid that the court said needed to be paid out. The president today threw a bit of a confusing wrench into that mix.
Yeah, the president has been all over the map on SNAP. He is, by the way, under a court order to dole out those benefits. He suggested earlier today he wouldn't do that, and then the White House seemed to walk it back. The politics really are shifting here. There are many in the Republican Party whose antenna would go to a place of Democrats care more about this program, just use it as leverage to get them to come to the table. But it's a lot of President Trump's own constituents who are very reliant on this program. He has a working class coalition now that he has to pay attention to. But what's really shaking this loose, Hallie, is the pain of the shutdown is intensifying, and both parties are determined to look for off-ramps in a way that is growing in a significant way. Now, Senate Democrats had a very long meeting on Capitol Hill today, after which the Democratic leader, Chuck Schumer, came out and said it was a great meeting, that they're exploring all options. Republicans seem to think that tonight's election could shake something loose. Take a listen to what they said.
I'm optimistic that we should be able to get something done this week.
There's enough Democrats that I'm friends with that were willing to vote last week, and they were assured that that Schumer would let them vote the way they need to this week if they would just wait until after the election.
Now, I would take that one with a bit of a grain of salt. I've talked to some Democratic senators who say if they do have a good election night, if anything, it should motivate Republicans to soften their stance, to back off and come to the table and grant some concessions. What Democrats see as a possible endgame here is that they can bank the Senate Majority Leader John Thune's promise of a vote on ACA subsidies, not a guarantee of an outcome. It doesn't look like they're going to get that, and a deal on some appropriations bills where they can point to the contents of them and said, we got this, that, and the other, and we're ready to move forward. And finally, for Republicans, they're under a lot of pressure from President Trump to nuke the filibuster, which they don't want to do for a whole host of reasons, and they're consistently losing in the blame game, including in our recent polls. So they are also motivated.
Let me pull up. Let me weave the thread here between the shutdown, between what we're seeing tonight and the election results, and this new exit poll that's just into us. I want to ask our team to pull this back up on screen. It was how the federal government cuts affected your family's finances, and I think the state was Virginia here. And you can see that about 59%, I think we showed this earlier, say that it affected them either a lot or a little, but to some degree affected them. Now, this is obviously, some of this predates, of course, the shutdown. This is a new one as well. 39% said not at all, Sahil. But the way that the federal government is managing its personnel and its workforce has an impact in a state like Virginia.
Yeah, and it's still a majority saying it had some impact, which is important. They are inclined to blame Republicans more, as we've seen in polls. This goes all the way back to DOGE, which infuriated a lot of Virginians because that was President Trump's own government, messing around with the federal workforce and
the Elon Musk-led push to try to cut down on the number of workers inside the government.
Exactly. So there's anger about that. There's anger over the shutdown. It's all kind of snowballing. And, let's not forget, back in 2013, Democrats won the governor's race in Virginia during an off-year election, in large part because of the government shutdown, which was then pushed by Senator Ted Cruz over the issue of Obamacare. He was trying to defund it then. Democrats this time around are trying to extend existing funding.
Sahil Kapoor, thank you very much for keeping an eye on all of it. We'll be talking again, I know, when we're both back home in Washington. Appreciate that. Back to our top story when we come back, those key elections happening across the country, including one in Pennsylvania. Why some typically under-the-radar races there are getting some national attention for a good reason. That's next. To Pennsylvania now, where three Supreme Court races, state Supreme Court races that might typically kind of fly under the radar, are certainly not doing that this cycle. Voters today are deciding whether to retain these three state Supreme Court justices. They're all Dems elected back in 2015. We shifted the court from a Republican majority to a 5-2 Democratic majority. Now, voters are going to have a choice. If they say yes to keeping them on board, to retaining them, It means they're sticking around for the next 10 years on a court that's been at the center of really contentious fights over voting rights, redistricting, elections in the swingiest of swing states. Jane Tim is joining us now. Put another way, Jane, this 2025 race has huge 2028 implications potentially.
Absolutely. This is the Democratic majority that ruled on redistricting map in 2018, tossed out a Republican gerrymander that created the lines they're voting on now, or the other lines. And then this is the court that ruled on abortion, that said that Trump's voter fraud claims in Pennsylvania were not credible. They did not change anything about these elections. This is an incredibly important court. And part of the reason it's so important is if they are not retained, they don't just call an immediate election. They have to wait until 2027 to vote on another one. So to step back, if you say 3 justices are not retained, we're moving on, they lose their seats. Those seats are empty unless the Republican-controlled Senate and the Democratic governor can agree on temporary appointments. It's a tall order in today's partisan environment. And so Democrats, they really want this. They want this majority as a stopgap to Trump. And they want, and they're spending quite a bit of money. I just pulled the most recent spending money. $13 million has been spent in the last 34 days compared to Republicans just under $3 million. I can't overstate how much money that is in an incredibly sleepy race. Yeah. This is a back-of-the-ballot race. It's supposed to be nonpartisan. When voters go to the polls today, they're not even going to see a D or an R by their names. This is a yes or no vote. It's supposed to be much less of a big deal than it is. But with the majority on the ballot, it's a big deal.
And it's so interesting because, as we talked about, listen, you know PA well from the last couple of election cycles here, and the spotlight is so intense. How much has this race resonated with voters in Pennsylvania? What's your sense? Like, do you think they're in the Commonwealth? People know about this? People have an awareness of this?
They absolutely do. And I don't think people, judicial races are the kind of thing that people find on their ballot and they don't even research before they get there. But this is one that is creating its own signs. Vote yes, vote no. There's direct mailers. There's television ads. It's odd to see television ads for a judicial retention race. Yeah. Very few people lose their job this way. I can only think of one other justice who has ever lost their job this way. But with 3, it's a lot. And it's definitely gotten the attention of a lot of voters. You have Barack Obama endorsing a slate of retention voters. It's just an unusual year.
Yeah, that's a sentence you would never have thought was on your bingo card maybe 8 years ago or so. Jane Tim, we're so glad to have you covering this. I know you'll be doing it all night long right here in our NBC News election headquarters, right?
Yep.
All right, Jane, appreciate you. Good to see you. Thank you. Let me bring back in Hogan Gidley, Ashley Etienne, who are joining us now. Pennsylvania, let's talk about it for a second here. Jane just went through the importance of this, again, state Supreme Court retention race, basically, and the outsized level of attention that it's getting, Ashley.
No, I think, I was recently meeting with the Democratic chairman, Ken Martin, and he made this point that we're going all in everywhere on every race, even these court battles, these seats at the court level, double downing on an affordability message. So, his point is we're doing things differently. We're not going to let any race go uncontested. And so that's what we're seeing right now.
Stepping back from just the state of Pennsylvania, Hogan, and you know this well, that for years, this was more, I would say, the purview of Republicans. You look at somebody like Mitch McConnell, for example, who really pushed to get, and speaking on the federal level, more conservative nominees in the mix, basically, sort of to foster this generational change inside the judicial system.
Well, yeah, I agree, but that was in response to, I think, Democrat control. Remember, 2016, people would always ask me, why are you guys talking about the Supreme Court so much?
Because
does it matter?
But wait a second, I was in the field in 2015, 2016. Yes. You know why we're talking about it? I was covering Republicans. Every voter you talked to in Iowa was bringing it up.
I know. I'm saying they would ask me why, and I would say, because we lose all the cases. If we were winning them all, we wouldn't care. And they were like, that's fair. And then now it seems like Democrats are getting more engaged because, as you've seen, the first Trump term was met with every time he tried to do something, lawsuit, lawsuit, lawsuit. It began in that first administration, continued really while he was not president, quite frankly, and it started up again. This administration's more prepared for it, but they also understood the importance of getting some judges at the local level that would just uphold the laws opposed to legislating from the bench.
In the 90 seconds we have left this hour, let me pull up a couple of new exit polls that we are just getting in New Jersey first, showing the reason for your vote for governor here. The president was not a factor in about 47% of voters' decision-making process. opposition to the president was a factor, and about 38% in New Jersey. And I think we have Virginia as well that we can take a look at. Same question, the reason for the governor vote through the prism of the presidential lens here. Trump, not a very similar numbers, not a factor, and 47%, 37%. So right around the same number. Say they did it in opposition of the president here. This goes back to a way that we sort of started the conversation 45 minutes ago, and some of these numbers started to come in, which is the Trump factor being clearly a part of this for some voters in these blue states, but the messaging around affordability is also tied into this as well.
Yes.
You can say something about it if you like. It wasn't a question. It was just like
I'm trying. Yeah, but by polling, that's still a very significant number that say they oppose Trump. And so in these races, of course, what you want to do is you want to strike the chord that resonates with voters. And if it's beneficial for you to slap them with a relationship with Nancy Pelosi or Kamala Harris or Joe Biden or Donald Trump or Mitch McConnell or anybody else, you would do that. Again, I go back to the fact these are Democrat states electing Democrat candidates. I don't know what the problem is.
I mean, I can tell you what the problem is. I mean, if people have been saying that the Democrats have incessantly focused on Donald Trump, and these are Democratic states, and people are saying Donald Trump is not a factor, to me, that seems like, as a communicator, you get this, Hogan, that's a problem for the Democratic Party. That means you're not doing something right in terms of your messaging. If you're hyper-focusing on the president, blaming him for the shutdown, blaming him for the economy, and people are saying he's not a factor, you need to rejigger your messaging.
Hogan, Ashley, thank you both very much for being with us. You're sticking around, I know, next hour and all of the hours after that, so I appreciate that. We're going to sneak in a quick pause here to reset at the top of the hour as this wraps our special coverage at 5 Eastern. More coverage at 6 Eastern begins right now. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and we're keeping up our rolling coverage of these key elections happening today, happening right now. And looking at the clock, it is 6 o'clock Eastern. Polls close in Virginia in 1 hour in that key governor's race, which means we are going to see data. We're going to see vote result coming in potentially minutes after that. But even in the last hour, we've seen other kinds of data coming in as it relates to exit polls. You're looking at some of the polling locations from around the state and in other states, New Jersey and New York City. They have that key mayoral race. There's a redistricting ballot measure in California as well. Again, all of this amounts to, at least in these blue states, kind of a temperature check on the first year of President Trump's second term. You can see the poll closings there. And here's some of the info that we're getting in. You can see the approval ratings for the president as it relates to these voters in these 4 areas. He's nationally sitting right around there in the low 40s. You see that somewhat matched in Virginia, Jersey, perhaps unsurprisingly less than that in New York City, California, both obviously heavily blue locations. And this national outlook here, how do you think things are going in the country? 40% of voters say they're angry. 25% say they're dissatisfied. You can see it's only just about 30+% who say they feel good about how things are going. And that is in both of those key states where we're seeing these exit polls, New Jersey and Virginia. So some interesting dynamics at play here as we're taking a look at some of this info. What about in New York City, where you've got obviously that key mayoral race there? Zohran Mamdani looking to be the favorite based on polling. 56% of voters in New York City say cost of living is the most important issue. Listen, if you're the Mamdani campaign, this is what you want to see. You know why? He ran his whole campaign on this. He was laser focused on this issue of affordability. You see crime far back there at 22%. So an interesting note there. I bet you were coming back to that when we talk about New York in just a minute. We are in New York. We are in New Jersey. We are in Virginia. We are in California with our teams everywhere. But I want to start with Ryan Nobles, who is live for us in Virginia, where we're seeing some of these exit poll data coming in. Ryan, what is standing out to you, and what are you looking for the rest of the night?
Well, I think Democrats have to see that exit poll data, Hallie, and feel as though they made the right call in terms of their messaging in this race for governor. You know, I've covered 5 different gubernatorial elections here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and I've never seen Democrats as confident as they are tonight going into where we're going to see these polls close here in the next hour. Abigail Spanberger, at the top of the ticket for Democrats in Virginia, has heavily focused her message on the economy, these kitchen table issues, the cost of living, education, all these things that you see popping as the issues that were of the biggest concern to voters as they went here to the polls today. On the other hand, the Republican candidate, Winsome Sears-Earle, she really focused her campaign more on cultural issues, heavily leaning into the transgender rights issue, which, of course, was successful for President Trump a year ago, but has not seemed to have resonated in the same way in this race for governor here in Virginia. And then, of course, Virginia, perhaps more than any state in the country, is uniquely impacted by the federal government shutdown. Virginia has one of the highest percentages of federal government workers in the state. Not only that, many of the folks that work and live in Virginia are connected to the federal government, even if they're not necessarily federal government employees. So every aspect of the shutdown has a very big impact on voters here in Virginia. And as we've seen in polls, it seems to be more that Republicans are taking the blame for that than Democrats are. So Spanberger's message seems to be working and honing in with voters here in Virginia. Of course, there's still a lot to be said. There's still an hour's or so left worth of voting, and we still have to count all these ballots. So until those come through, we're going to have to see how this all turns out here in Virginia, Hallie.
Obviously, Ryan, we're seeing some of those numbers here. Important that the polls will be closing in just about 55 minutes. Thank you, pal. Appreciate you staying close to a camera as we look for more from you throughout the night. The other big gubernatorial race, of course, is in New Jersey, a governor's race. It's probably the most suspenseful one of the night. Stephanie Gosk is in East Brunswick, New Jersey for us. And I say that, Steph, because the polling shows that while Mikey Sherrill has maintained at least a degree of a lead, Jack Ciattarelli is right on her heels there. This is a state that was I'm going to call it second swingiest towards Donald Trump last November, right? In other words, saw a big shift towards the president, obviously towards the Republican candidate in that race. National races, different from state races. Let's give that as a caveat here, but give us a sense of what you're hearing on the ground, especially as we've seen some of the exit polls coming in showing the president's approval rating in New Jersey hovers right around where it does nationally, for example.
Yeah, listen, Hallie, that is a big data point for this election. And while you said you can't extrapolate a national election to a state election like this one, everyone is looking to see whether those inroads that Donald Trump made here during the presidential election, whether those hold. And let's look at some of the exit polling, specifically on the issues that matter most to people in New Jersey. And there is this whole issue of affordability. But if you look at the first three issues that matter most to people in New Jersey, it's taxes, 36%, economy, and health care. All of those fall under the umbrella of affordability. And so what you had is Donald Trump came in here during the presidential election and said, I'm going to help you out with affordability. People in this state, a lot of them said, well, the Democrats haven't done it for us. Maybe you will. And a lot of them voted for him because of it. Now you've had 11 months since he's been president. What Mikey Sherrill, the Democratic candidate, is hoping is that people will blame him for not fixing things. But keep in mind, you have had a Democrat as a governor in this state for the last 8 years, and a history in this state of always swapping out for the next party after, after having a governor of the same party for 2 terms. So that is what Jack Ciattarelli, the Republican candidate, has the winds at his back for that as well.
Stephanie Gosk live for us there in Jersey, in East Brunswick. Steph, we'll be looking forward to talking with you as the night really gets going here in the next couple of hours in the state where you are. Thanks, Steph. Let me bring in now Steve Kornacki, posted up at the big board. Steve, you're watching the clock, so here we are. 54 minutes now until polls close in Virginia. And I know there's a couple of key counties you're going to be looking at, right?
Yeah, let's take a look here at Virginia. And of course, the backdrop, we know this was a blue state, is a blue state that Kamala Harris beat Donald Trump in. But remember, Donald Trump made some inroads in Virginia last year. He made the inroads particularly in Northern Virginia. So these are some of the counties, big, densely populated counties outside Washington, D.C., that we're going to be keying in on. Let me show you one of the biggest right here. This is Loudoun County. Now, this was a Democratic county for Kamala Harris last year by 16 points. That was actually an improvement, though, for Donald Trump. It was an improvement that was made possible particularly by gains he made with Hispanic voters and with Asian American voters in Loudoun County. And again, this is something we saw throughout Northern Virginia, nearby in Prince William County. That's a giant one. We saw a similar dynamic. And just take a look here. This was also a county, Glenn Youngkin, when he got elected governor 4 years ago, the Republican. He didn't win it, but again, for a Republican, losing this by only about 10 points, 11 points, was a strong showing. So you want to see, as soon as the polls close tonight, I think Loudoun, we might get a pretty early readout on, is Earl Sears anywhere in this ballpark? ballpark, that would mean this is a competitive race statewide. Or are the Democrats getting the margins they're more accustomed to getting out of Loudoun County? Are they winning this thing by 20-plus points? Because this is home to a particular type of voter here, not the most Trump-friendly place. There's a lot of voters here, I think, who don't like Donald Trump, who are willing to vote for Youngkin. Does Trump returning to the White House make them now want to vote against Republicans again?
Can you talk about, Steve, what does a great night look like for Abigail Spanberger, and what is a win with an asterisk that maybe you're not feeling so amazing about it look for Abigail?
I mean, if we look at this statewide, again, it was just under 6 points. That was Kamala Harris's margin here. If you take a look, again, this was the governor's race, the last governor's race when Glenn Youngkin won. But if you go back to 2020, this state is, under certain conditions, winnable for Democrats by wide margins. Joe Biden won this by double digits.
Yeah.
The governor's race, if you went even further back in 2017, was close to a 10-point race. Again, if you looked at that 2024 election, where there was slack for Democrats was really kind of in this zone right here, Northern Virginia. There were actually counties, I can show you big counties in the rest of the state, where Harris actually improved on Joe Biden. So for Spanberger tonight, I think what she's hoping is in Northern Virginia. Think again, remember, we're in the middle of this shutdown, big federal workforce that lives there, people who know, federal workers. It's a big part of the economy in the area. I think she is hoping that antipathy to Trump, maybe a shutdown effect, kind of brings back those Democratic margins in Northern Virginia. And there's room still in the rest of the state. I mean, this is a big one right here, Chesterfield County. South of Richmond. I mean, check this one out. There were not many counties in the country that looked like this last year. Joe Biden won this county by under 7 points in 2020. Kamala Harris actually improved on his. Kamala Harris was finishing far worse than Joe Biden did in most counties in America in 2024. This is a giant county where she actually improved on Biden's share. So this is the kind of place where Spanberger, there might be room for Spanberger to grow even more. So if you put that together, further growth in a place like Chesterfield, return to Democratic numbers here, that's what Spanberger's folks would love to see. And something into the double digits, I think, would allow them to say, not just a win, but a commanding win.
I know one of the races you're most interested in is New Jersey, just because of the way that the margins are, what that might tell us about the so-called Trump coalition, if you will. There's also obviously the New York City race, too. And we just showed that exit poll that I just want to riff with you about for 2 seconds, if you'll indulge me here, because it talked about what was the most important issue for voters in New York City based on the exits. And 56% said the cost of living. When you look at a candidate like Mamdani, who ran his campaign on that, what does that tell you?
Yeah, so now this is interesting, Hallie, because we'll show you one other exit poll finding that goes with that, I think, because Mamdani obviously making cost of living so central to his message. But then we also asked in this poll, New York City voters, the policies the candidates are proposing, are they realistic or unrealistic?
Okay.
And look at that. Mamdani actually 43-53. It's Cuomo, and by a considerable margin there, 58% say realistic on his plans, 36% unrealistic. So, yes, top of mind for voters in New York City, cost of living. Yes, Mamdani has made cost of living the central theme of his campaign. But this tells you that voters maybe were looking at that, and saying, I'm not sure that's the most realistic way to go about it. That could be a factor here as well, Hallie.
Especially considering that Andrew Cuomo hammered this point about pragmatism and the pragmatism of policies when it came to Zohran Mamdani's candidacy. Steve, I should note for folks, you got a whole YouTube channel that's just you all night long. You're going to be on our Karnacki cam, the whole 9 yards. So thank you for doing that. We're going to see you every minute for the next 19 hours of our lives, or until this night is over. Thank you. We'll talk again, I know, in a couple hours, pal. Appreciate you.
Can't wait.
As we talk about New York, let's take you to New York because we have a live look at what's happening right now at the Mamdani campaign in Brooklyn. Our Sam Brock is there. He is joining us now. And Sam, you just heard Steve lay out some of the interesting nuggets here from our exit polling as it relates to New York City. Tell me what you're hearing from the campaign and from voters in your neck of the woods.
Well, it's so interesting, Hallie. I had a conversation with voters in Brooklyn, not far from where I'm standing at the Paramount Theater right now, about specifically what drew them into this campaign. And one woman who said she's a millennial, she was there with her husband, they want to buy a house, they want to start a family. And she said, even if you are lucky enough to be able to have financial assistance from your family, it's still not enough to be able to pay for housing in this city. So it really does speak to the fact that there is this yearning for really shortening the gap between what people can and cannot access. Another gentleman telling me, I never thought I would vote for a Democratic socialist, but I look around right now at the delta between the haves and the have-nots, and I'm so stunned by it that I'm buying into what Zohran Mamdani has been selling. This is a guy who his social media campaign, which has really connected millions upon millions of people in simple ways, managed to relate halalflation. Right, this was right at the beginning of when he became this political phenomenon. He talked to an owner of a halal cart in downtown Manhattan about the fact that he is paying $22,000 for a permit that the city says is supposed to cost $200. And as a result, the halal that you all eat, you and I, instead of $7 or $8 a plate, is $11 a plate. And he made it so simple yet so accessible. This is also a city, Hallie, where there's some 100 to 150,000 children who are homeless, and that is a figure that has been static over the course of years. When I asked the same woman I was speaking with earlier, do you think Zohran Mamdani's plans are realistic? She said, I do think they're realistic. I can understand why there would be some skepticism out there, but what we're doing, the old way of politics, has not worked. Let's shake it up. Let's try something different because this has not been effective for folks. And I will throw one other figure out there for you. NBC News recently conducted a broader nationwide poll and asked Americans, has Trump met your expectations or failed when it comes to the economy? They were his worst marks in the entire poll. 2/3 of Americans saying that he was failing on the economy, failing on advocating for middle-class Americans, failing on controlling inflation. Those are the very issues that Zohran Mamdani has been campaigning on. Now, of course, we talk about Andrew Cuomo and the fact this is someone that has been in the public eye, a 3-term governor who has done incredible things for New York in many respects. Infrastructure projects like LaGuardia and the Moynihan train station. He's raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour, doing things that were transformational at the time. And yet, many people that we speak with don't feel like he has their best interest at heart. And that really is sort of where we land right now as we wait for the polls to close.
Sam Brock, live for us there in Brooklyn. He'll be with us all night as we're taking a look. Again, to Sam's point, Mamdani's campaign really laser focused on issues like the cost of housing. And look at this, nearly 90% of voters, the vast majority say it is absolutely either a major or a minor problem for them, the cost of housing where they live in New York City. Let me bring in now Rahima Ellis, who is at the Cuomo campaign headquarters for us tonight. And Rahima, as Mamdani has made that argument, Andrew Cuomo has really tried to focus on this issue of experience, or in his view, lack thereof, for Mamdani, as well as sort of the realism of the policies he's put forward.
He absolutely has, but he's also, in terms of focusing on experience, he talks about that under the Clinton administration. He was the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. He says he can get on the ground and he can begin doing the things for New Yorkers that they say that they want. The housing issue, the safety issue, the affordable issue, there are also issues that Cuomo is running under. I talked to several voters about 15 miles from here, north of the city. And one of the things that one woman said to me, she's about 30 years old, an African-American woman, she said she wants to make certain that the city of New York remains a Democratic city. And for that reason, she was voting for Mamdani. A man that I talked with, he said that he wanted to make certain that the city remained an affordable city, a place that's safe. Similar issues to what we heard from the other woman. And he said that's why he's voting for Cuomo. Another man said to me he wants all of those issues that both and all of the candidates are talking about. And he said for that reason, he was going to vote for Mamdani. And last one I want to share with you, Hallie, a woman, a mother of two, a married woman of two, said her issues are safety, education, housing, transportation, affordability. She said no one she is really convinced can deliver all of those things, but she said, I have to vote. And she's voting for Cuomo. So that's just one snapshot of how voters in this city were demonstrating to me today, just little old me, of how they were going to be voting. The question becomes one, does Cuomo's record, will that matter for voters who look and say, well, he has also issues against him in terms of having these charges or these allegations against him of sexual harassment? He has denied all of that. And will it matter that Trump has endorsed him? Cuomo has stepped back from that endorsement, saying he didn't seek it, he doesn't want it, that it really doesn't hurt, it doesn't help him at all. In terms of Silwa, the Republican who's running in the race, he also says he's not so concerned about endorsement from Trump. And what Cuomo has said about Silwa being in the race, he says he's a spoiler, and that a vote for Silwa is really a vote for Mamdani. What voters will do, how they're thinking about all of this, Hallie, hopefully we'll know before the night is over. But this candidate, in terms of Cuomo. He's really running for this political life and trying to have a political comeback after he resigned in disgrace from the office of governor just 4 years ago, an office that he had held, Hallie, for about 10 years.
Rahima Ellis, live for us there at Cuomo campaign headquarters. Rahima in New York, thank you very much. We'll be checking back in with you as well. Appreciate that. Let me bring in somebody who it is safe to say is monitoring these races very closely tonight, and that is DNC Chair Ken Martin. Ken, thanks for being back on. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Hallie. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So 6:18 Eastern time, polls close Virginia in just about 40 minutes. Then obviously we'll see Jersey, New York, California later on tonight. Give me the gut check. What are the reports that you're getting in, if you could summarize on sort of where turnout is, what you're seeing on the ground in some of these states?
We're confident, but we're not complacent here with just an hour left until the polls close there in Virginia. We're going to keep turning out the vote. But look, you know, Abigail Spanberger, Mikey Sherrill will be elected tonight. We feel good about the races in Pennsylvania and California as well. What we're seeing right now is that this election has become a choice between the kitchen table and gilded ballrooms. And clearly our candidates are focused on those kitchen table issues, the economic anxiety that Americans are facing right now with the squeeze that they are facing in their everyday lives, with the cost of goods going up, their concerns about health care access, their concerns about housing, their concerns about just putting groceries on their table, right? Most people believe in this country, as you could see by your own exit polls, that things are not going in the right direction, that their lives actually haven't improved since Donald Trump was inaugurated. And as a result, you're going to see a big night for Democrats. And what this will send a message to folks around the country is that the reports of the death of the Democratic Party were greatly exaggerated. The Democratic Party is back, and I've got a message for Donald Trump and the Republicans. We're coming for you. We're going to put a big check on your power in 26.
Okay, so I hear you obviously drawing that line between what happens tonight and what happens next year, and obviously the super critical midterms. Is there a risk, Ken, of over extrapolating the results from tonight? Do you worry about a sense of overconfidence if you do that?
No, look, I mean, one thing people know about me, and it's why I never lost a statewide election in Minnesota, I never get overly confident. We don't believe the polls. We just get out there and we fight and we organize, and that's what we've been doing all year. I've been on the job for 9 months, and we've seen a historic overperformance across the country. We are winning elections up and down the ballot. Sure, some of that's anti-Trump sentiment, but it's also the candidates running under our banner who are actually focused on the issues that Americans care about. They are focused on an economic agenda that gives people hope that their better days are ahead of them, that they can actually climb the economic ladder and build a better life for their families, right? And they're not, they're not gravitating towards Republicans because Republicans are not offering solutions. In fact, they lied to them, right? Donald Trump is more focused, and the Republicans are more focused on gilded ballrooms and fancy Great Gatsby parties than actually helping anyone improve their lives. And certainly at a time when the government shut down, they've shown no interest in the lives of working people in this country. And so I think what you'll see tonight is an embrace of the Democratic agenda, which is a working class economic agenda, giving hope to people's dreams.
To that point, Ken, and then I know you're limited on time, but to that point here, when you look at what we've seen in some of the exit polls so far, and again, it is early. We haven't even seen a smidgen of actual vote count data yet. We won't for another 40 minutes or so. But if you look at some of this in Virginia and in New Jersey, when you ask how much was Donald Trump, was the president, a factor in your vote, almost half of voters in both of those states, Ken, said he was not a factor at all. And so I wonder, do Democrats, in your view, need to pull back on the anti-Trump messaging here when you look at the way that Mikey Sherrill, Abigail Spanberger have run their races and have put their messaging forward to get to the point that you're making on being a party for the working class?
Well, I think what you're going to see is Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill will win tonight. And the reason they're going to win is because they ran for something. They ran on a vision of how to actually bring down the cost and make it more easy for people to afford their lives and to actually get ahead, to have an opportunity, to have a shot at the American dream. And that's why they're going to win. The through line between all of our candidates, a candidate in New York City, Zohran Mamdani, Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey, Abigail Spanberger in Virginia is that all of them are focused on affordability. All of them are running on a positive message, and they're running for something, not just against Trump. Of course, they're also talking about Trump because Trump has been a disaster. He hasn't delivered on anything he said he was going to do. But we're not just, in that space. We're just not living in that space of attacking Trump. We are offering the American people a values proposition, and the value proposition is this: vote for Democrats, and we'll help you actually achieve the dreams that you want and build a better life for your families.
Just quickly before I let you go, and I promise I will, if in fact your prediction is borne out tonight, and by midnight or whenever we're going to know the results, it turns out that both of the Democratic candidates have won in these gubernatorial races, you suggested that that portends good things for Democrats come 2026. Do you think then that it would be enough of a wave that you could flip both chambers in Congress next year? Is that your sense of things based on how tonight goes?
Well, it's certainly not impossible. I'm not going to make predictions right now on what 26 will look like in terms of both chambers. But remember, we only need 3 seats to win back the U.S. House. And the average swing in the congressional midterm election for the party that's out of power is 26 seats. And it spikes to 38 seats when you have a president sitting under 50%. And Donald Trump just hit the all-time low of his second term at 37% approval rating, right? And so the reality is things certainly don't bode well for Trump or the Republicans next year, which is why, by the way, they're trying to rig the map and change the rules of the game with this mid-cycle redistricting. So I say this, look. It's not impossible that we could win both chambers back. And I'll use 2005 as an example, right? George Bush comes in, he attacks Social Security, his numbers go into the toilet, and no one thought there was a prayer's chance in hell we were going to win back both chambers of Congress in 2006, and we did, right, with a huge big wave election that year. I'm not going to predict that. I know what we're going to work towards that. We're going to roll up our sleeves and do everything we can to win both chambers. And it certainly tonight is the first step in doing that.
DNC Chair Ken Martin, thank you very much, Ken, for being back on the show. We're glad to have you, of course, on election night. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
We've got to get to some non-election related big breaking news that's coming into us right now with word of a UPS plane crash. You are taking a look here at the scene. That is obviously a massive plume of smoke there. It crashed apparently shortly after taking off from an international airport, from the big airport in Louisville in Kentucky. You're looking at pictures of the aftermath right here. The plane had been heading for Hawaii, according to the FAA. Local officials there say that there are injuries. This is a live look now, as obviously it's gotten darker. Apparently, the plane had a lot of fuel on it when it crashed. Officials now want people around the crash for a radius of really several miles to shelter in place. You've got the NTSB now investigating. You've got the FAA investigating. We've got our teams making their way to it for more information as well. We'll stay on top of this story and bring you new details as we get them. You will see them here on NBC News. You will also, of course, see the latest as we get closer to polls closing in the Commonwealth of Virginia, with key races as well in New Jersey, New York, California, Pennsylvania, and beyond. We've got much more coming up right after the break here on NBC News Now. We are back with continuing coverage of Election Night 2025 from here in New York as we're looking at races in Virginia, New Jersey, California, and beyond. And we're getting a gut check here on how voters are feeling about things like the economy, how their families' financials are doing ahead of those first poll closures, really just about 30 minutes from now, looking at the clock. You got President Trump saying today that if affordability is your issue, vote Republican. He goes on to suggest that energy costs are plummeting. Gas is getting close to $2 a gallon. We've got a reality check on that coming up in just a second. This, of course, is after the Treasury Department said just 24 hours ago inflation is running above target. Christine Romans is joining us now as we're seeing some of the exit polls now coming in from tonight's races here. People care about the economy. This just feels like such a headline coming out of some of the early data that we're seeing so far.
You know, affordability and cost of living are really high on the list here. When you look at New Jersey in particular, it's electricity. That's a big problem there. Now that, you know, do they blame the Oval Office for that? Probably not. But it is a big kind of grinding expense that has been a problem there. Taxes and the economy and healthcare. Those are the most important issues there in New Jersey. And cost of living and affordability, again and again, are on the top of the list. When you look at New Jersey and Virginia and a lot of these other places that we've talked to, NBC News did some polling over the weekend that was just really fascinating, that showed that people just aren't getting the positive messaging from the White House here. They say when asked how things are going, right, in terms of how Trump is going, things are going in the country, they're saying that things are not going well. 66% of people said this is not going the way that I wanted in terms of inflation and cost of living. 65% were disappointed that did not think that Trump had lived up to the expectations of looking out for the middle class. And again, the economy overall still just top issue.
Can I do a little throwback, Christine?
Yeah.
Because when you're talking, it's reminding me of a story that you and I did together last year, right before the election, where we went out with a big whiteboard and we asked people, how do you feel about the economy, right? The economy is, and they would fill in the blank. And you and I talked about where the raw numbers were. This was, again, before the election last year. We're doing pretty good. Unemployment rate was coming down. Inflation was coming down. People still felt bad. Sucks was the number one. The economy sucks is what we got again and again. That's how people felt, even when it didn't necessarily match the numbers. So talk about those numbers. When the president says gas is $2 a gallon, listen, the national average is closer to 3, right? It's a little bit above 3. The electricity prices in a state like New Jersey going up, in a state like Virginia going up, a fraction of what people spend in their budgets, right? It's not your mortgage, but that's a particularly visceral one because you're running your heat or not based on what that bill number is.
Those gas prices are lower today than they were a week ago and a month ago and a year ago. So they're going in the right direction. The president, he loves a big number. He loves a superlative, right? He's like, it's going to be 2. It's going to be 2. Well, a lot of the experts say it's going to continue to drift down. That is real savings. The stock market, the president uses this a lot as well. It is record highs in the stock market.
It's going gangbusters
and
if you got money in the market.
And it's up 40-some% just over the past year, up 95% in 5 years. That's fantastic. So why do in this polling and this exit polling, do people still feel like things aren't going in the right direction? It's because childcare costs are very high. Food prices, I mean, I wrote down a lot of these things. Shelter prices up 23% over the past 4 years. Car insurance up 56% over the past 4 years. Food, all the food categories are up, 19, 18, 20%. The S&P is up 40%. That's true, but it's those daily bills, I think, that accumulate against on how people feel.
Also, not everybody has a 401k. Not everyone is invested in the stock market, Christine, and that gets to something else too. That we have seen the wealthiest Americans. They're spending money. They're digging the economy. They're going on their vacations. They're booking their they're booking their trips, et cetera, in a way that less wealthy Americans are not.
And I've been watching the fast food earnings and the fast casual company earnings. You can tell a lot about the economy when you see how people are behaving. And it was Chipotle just a few days ago said the 25 to 35-year-old cohort, something had happened there. They were pulling back, and in a notable way. And that's what a lot of people are calling the K-shaped economy, where you've got it's just up and away. If you've got home equity, you've got a job, and you've got
money in the markets.
Money in the markets. It's great. These are the best of times. If you suddenly had to resume your student loan payments, which happened over the summer, right? That's $200 or $300 or whatever less a month that you have to spend. At the same time, that there's the accumulated effect of 5 years of higher than normal inflation, and that starts to be a bit of a drag. But the bottom line, the job market's still sturdy, but not growing gangbusters anymore. We're watching for signs of weakness. The housing market, really hard for young people to get into. I just told you that stat. The typical age of a first-time home buyer is 40 years old. Imagine. I mean, that's so interesting.
I mean, that's young, babe. That's young in life. But for buying a home,
40 is great, but that's the oldest in history. Usually, family creation and that family dynamic starts a lot earlier, but people just can't afford to get in it yet. So all of those are just like grinding things in the backdrop. And who will they blame? Who knows?
Christine Romans, we're so glad to have you tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're
Good
welcome.
to see you here. We've got a lot more to get into, not just the economy, not just these governor's races, but this redistricting arms race, you could call it, with the spotlight on California. You see Liz Kreutz, she's getting ready for her live shot right there. We're going to talk about it, not just in California, but in states coast to coast that are looking to try to get in the game when it comes to 2026 and beyond. That's next. So it's not just these key state races in Virginia, New Jersey, the mayoral race in the city of New York that are popping off tonight. It's also this question about redistricting. You saw it already in Texas. You've seen it in some other red states. Now you've got California looking to make a push into figuring out how to potentially win Democrats some seats in the House of Representatives back home in Washington. There are major implications on this. I don't care if you live in California or not. This matters to you potentially, depending on which side of the of the aisle you sit on. Let me bring in now Hogan Gidley, the Deputy White House Press Secretary in President Trump's first administration, along with Ashley Etienne, former Communications Director for Vice President Kamala Harris and former Senior Advisor to former Speaker Nancy Pelosi with us now. You will be with us all night long. Hope you had your Wheaties. I know you both did. Ashley, let me start with you as we talk about California here, because you've got, it's so interesting to me. I see it as really a two dynamic thing going on here with Prop 50, which obviously polls close way later on tonight. We'll see what kind of results we get out of that. It's not just about redistricting. There's also a real Newsom piece to this. He has become, in many ways, the face of the opposition to President Trump, the California governor, obviously. There's big 2028 vibes around all of this, in addition to the sort of meat and potatoes of this ballot measure, which is trying to redraw the congressional maps in California.
Absolutely. Did you see me smiling? I'm excited about Gavin Newsom. He's figured out the secret sauce here and how to oppose Donald Trump. He's doing it in sort of a three-tier strategy. One, he's going after him in the courts. He's going after him in terms of legislation with the redistricting. And he's turning the mirror on Donald Trump and having a lot of fun with him. And so I think he's really setting the new playbook for how Democrats need to go after and sort of mount an opposition to Donald Trump. And it's incredibly impressive. So I will say this, though. Interestingly enough, I find that the governor is really, I would say, is catching his stride. And I've seen him most recently. He did the interview this past Sunday with Kristen.
That's right.
He clearly has caught his stride. I think he's feeling comfortable. He's definitely going to run. And he's increasing his appeal and really motivating the base and generating some energy among the base.
You're also smiling, I assume, for different reasons.
For different reasons. All night we've been here, and my friend Ashley keeps talking about how the Democrats have to have something more than just going after Trump. And then when she talked about Gavin Newsom, all she talked about was him going after Donald Trump. What has this guy done to improve the lives of Californians, regardless of race, religion, color, or creed? How good is his state doing? That is going to matter on the national stage, because typically governors use what they have done to run for president of the United States. Now, while he is the hot candidate right now, and thankfully he came out and said what everyone knew, which is, yeah, I'm thinking about 2028. It'd be disingenuous if I didn't talk about it. He still, by a large measure for the American people, is an abject failure in that state, because it is a serious haven for crime, for homelessness, and high taxes, which people do not like.
Let me bring it back to the redistricting issue, because there's another piece to this, too. I said it, and I mean it. If you don't live in California, this is still really interesting and important, potentially, if you care about what happens in Washington, and I think everybody does, which is the way that you're seeing some of these red states. President Trump wants this to happen, right? He has made these calls to try to get some of these states to redraw maps. But you're seeing in some of these states, and I think about Indiana, not all Republicans are jumping on board with that in a full-throated way, Hogan. And I wonder how you see that, because we don't often see pockets of resistance to President Trump inside the Republican Party. It's his party. He's made that super clear. He's the leader 100%. How do you see these sort of pockets of resistance and that playing out when it comes to these redistricting fights in some of these red states?
I mean, look, again, redistricting, dealing with these issues at the state level, I think in large part the last census was problematic, because when you take...
And just to explain, typically, obviously, we redraw congressional maps depending on the census, which comes out every 10 years. Here we are sort of mid-cycle, if you will. That's why this is so notable and different and unusual.
It's different in large part, too, because what people don't know is you count people in this country who are here illegally in the census, and that often determines the number of seats you get in some of these states. And so if you shift and change, raise or lower the number of seats someone gets in a given state, it can change the entire outlook, not just for the presidential, obviously, but for the congressional districts, too, and who has representation in Washington, D.C. So both parties have gerrymandered over decades. Both parties have done this for a long time. The question is who wins out and what does it do to the political landscape, changing the numbers.
Then you think those pockets of resistance go away? You don't think that? You think in a state like Indiana, the governor there is going to...
I don't know that it matters that much.
Okay, that's
this has been my theme tonight. I just don't know that it matters all that much.
Okay, well...
I know we have to talk about things that matter.
You got 7 more hours, bud, so I'd workshop
You have enough intensity and fire for the whole set this evening. We were just talking about how excited you were tonight.
Because it does have implications. I do think there's a... Can I just say, I think there's a risk that sometimes when we look... Let's be honest, these are 4 blue states that we're looking at here in terms of these marquee races. Obviously, there's Pennsylvania and the state Supreme Court races there, retention races. But there is an implication potentially, especially when it comes to redistricting for people all across the country.
Yep.
There may be lessons, Ashley, right, for the Democratic Party. We just had Ken Martin on, the DNC chair. He's feeling real confident. I mean, he's predicting a win. He thinks this could be a wave come 2026. You know, and I asked him, are you worried that maybe you're getting a little bit overconfident here? That there may be a risk, not tonight, but that when you look ahead to 2026, Democrats could over-extrapolate what tonight's results mean for the midterms. Bringing up, Ashley, a point that we talked about an hour ago, which is that about 47% of voters in these states, about half of voters say Donald Trump is not a factor, and the messaging on the economy, perhaps for Democrats, needing to take precedence. And I wonder how you see that, and then we'll hear from voters in a second.
No, so as I was mentioning earlier, I met with Ken Martin, who's the head of the DNC, and he made the point that each one of these gubernatorial races are hyper-focused on the economy, that they're not talking about Donald Trump. Now,
they're talking a bit about Donald Trump.
They may have, right, but in the context of the economy, that they're not focused on democracy and corruption, all of these other issues that we know he's underwater on in the polls. And so although national Democrats might be talking incessantly about Donald Trump and leaning in, these two particular candidates are not doing that. And that's what you're seeing in the polls, where people are saying Donald Trump is not registering, but the economy actually is. It's because they've been hyper-focused on an affordability message.
One Democratic strategist put it to me this way. It's about what's happening in these states at your local mall and not on the national mall, which was perhaps a pithy way to put it. I'm going to ask both of you.
There aren't already malls anymore, though.
Gen Z is bringing them back, haven't you?
Good.
I want you to stand by for a second. Thank you. We're going to have much more on election coverage, but we got to get back to that big breaking news we told you about just a couple of minutes ago out of Kentucky. This UPS plane that crashed right after takeoff from an airport there in Louisville. Want to pull up a live shot here. It is dark, but can you see that kind of red glow there? We had an image earlier, too, of a huge sort of plume of smoke. This plane was headed for Hawaii with 3 crew members on board, according to UPS. There is now a shelter-in-place order for some places around the airport here. We want to show you some brand new and frankly stunning video we're getting just in of the plane as it was going down the runway. There it is. Did you see it? The fire on the side of the plane as it was speeding off. Look, and then this fireball that just exploded. It is just horrific to see. Oh, God, it's terrible to watch. We're going to cut away from this, and I want to bring in Tom Costello, who's got more on this. And, Tom, obviously we know that officials have said there are injuries here. What else are you learning as this is very quickly developing?
Yeah, it's very, very quickly developing. The mayor's office says that there were multiple injuries, and our local affiliate there is suggesting that 4 people have been transported, at least 4 people, transported to area hospitals. This happened at 5:13 p.m. Eastern Time. This was a UPS cargo flight 2976 leaving Muhammad Ali International Airport on its way to Honolulu. We're told 3 crew members were on board. We do not know their conditions at this hour, but UPS is confirming that this did occur. A crash did occur there, and 3 crew members were on board. This is an MD-11 cargo plane. So this used to be a very common wide-body passenger plane, but over the last 10 to 15 years, it's really transitioned to more of a cargo plane. Candidly, it has some reliability issues and a kind of a sordid past in terms of previous incidents and crashes around the world. There, as you could see, if you're departing and you're leaving from the UPS Worldport, that is that's a critical piece of video right there. Can we put that into a loop or back it up and drop the banner? Because look at that engine. As this plane is rolling down the runway, it appears that one of the engines may already have flames coming out of the engine. There you go. Look at that on the left side. It would appear there was already fire on that engine. So that's going to be critical as the NTSB, as the FAA tried to determine what happened here.
And, Tom, can I just throw in, too, just to make the point as we're seeing it take off, it would have had a lot of fuel on board, right, if it's making that trip.
38,000 gallons. Yeah, 38,000 gallons of fuel on an MD-11 going all the way to Honolulu. At the end of that runway near the UPS Worldport, we're told that there are some businesses at the end of the runway. I can't tell you what types of businesses, and we don't know if anybody on the ground there has been injured, but clearly that's a high priority. There's been the shelter-in-place order in a 5-mile radius, in part because you've got just a massive amount of jet fuel that's on fire right now. That's a toxin. On top of that, we don't know if there were any hazardous materials on board that plane that could also be a toxin. So this is a major aviation incident right now. Multiple fire departments responding to assist the Louisville Fire Department. In addition, NTSB and FAA, as you would expect, also responding. But at this hour, it is still very much a fight against the flames and heavy smoke there you see in Louisville at the UPS Worldport. The UPS Worldport, if I didn't say it already, this is a huge, a very important cargo hub in North America for UPS, and it's right there in Louisville.
Yeah. Tom Costello, I know it's going to be a long night ahead for you as we're working to report out what exactly happened here, the injuries, et cetera. So, Tom, thank you for being close to the camera. We'll be checking back in with you. Appreciate that. Okay. We'll have more on that as Tom and his team get more information from the aviation perspective. We're also going to have more on the political landscape, too, with a live look at both campaign headquarters in Virginia. That's next. We are back with our continuing coverage here, rolling right now on NBC News Now on those major elections out of Virginia, New Jersey, California, New York. This is a live look here. Gang, we are 12 minutes till polls close in Virginia. You know what that means? Vote result coming in minutes after that. This is a big deal, right? And so we are going to be counting down every second until that happens. We are taking a live look now at both the Spamberger headquarters, the Earl Sears headquarters as well. And I want to bring in somebody who knows this state extremely well. That's because he led it for a bit, former Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe, who is joining us now. Gov, it's good to see you back on the show. Thank you for being here.
Great to be with you.
I would have to start off by asking how you think it's going to go tonight. We're 12 minutes till polls close. We may know more very soon. Kornacki is fueling up, getting ready for all of this. What's your sense of where things stand?
So we got great candidates on the Democratic side. You got President Trump minus 15 in Virginia today. We've had the Doge cuts. We've had federal contractors cut. And we have a government shutdown. Virginia is the #1 state in America for federal workers. And we have thousands and thousands of workers out of work, not getting paid, and Donald Trump owns this. So here, I'll make a prediction. I think Abigail Spanberger, great candidate. I think she wins by 10 to 11 points. I think we win the lieutenant governor, attorney general, and I think we have a chance of picking up 59 to 60 total seats in the House of Delegates. We're at 51 now. It's going to be a big night. Listen, people worried about affordability. They're worried about their health care costs, which are going up an average of $2,000 for Virginians. Grocery prices are up, and their energy prices are up. And Donald Trump owns us, and Republicans have been so scared to take him on that they have decimated our economy. Our GDP third quarter went from 6 to 1.7. 7 straight months of unemployment has gone up. It's a disgrace for the Republican and Donald Trump.
So then, Governor, if it goes the way you think it's going to go tonight, and there is a decisive win for Abigail Spanberger, let's say, and again, obviously we don't know yet, what do you think then the lesson would be? Is there one that's not an over-extrapolation for 2026 and the midterms for other Democrats in other places as well, who are looking to, replicate those results? Is it that you lash, the economy to President Trump? How do you see that linkage, if there is one?
Yeah, good question. I think it's going to come down to the issue of affordability. I think Donald Trump ran on helping your life, and you've now seen grocery prices go up. You've seen energy prices go up. And now with that horrible bill that they passed, like just in Virginia, an average Virginian is going to see their health care costs go up by $2,000. Their energy prices are up. And I think for candidates out there talking about affordability and dealing with all the issues of the crazy Trump administration, we have a shutdown now, and I think it's a good message. But listen, every race is unique. Abigail's run a great campaign. I've known her well. She is a great member of Congress. She's going to focus on jobs. She's going to focus on affordability. And the Trump insanity, let's just take tariffs. In Virginia, our rural farmers, many of them are going bankrupt today. They can't sell their soybeans to China. China has not bought one soybean. They used to be our biggest buyer. And people who voted for Trump are now saying, listen, the gig's up. You've done nothing for us but hurt our lives. So I think we're going to have a good 26. I think we win the House. I think the Senate's in play. But this year we win both governors. I think the California proposition probably passes 2-1. I think it's going to be a good night for Democrats because we're focused on affordability issues.
The historical headwinds are behind Abigail Spanberger here. We've talked about how the candidate whose party controlled the White House has lost 11 of the last 12 governor races in Virginia. Yeah. They call it the Virginia curse. You know this because you were the exception to that, of course, when you won.
Who was the only one to break that curse?
It was you. What do you attribute that to?
Now you're on message. Very good. But it's hard because we're so tied to the federal government.
That's right. That's right. And you look at that, and that gets us to some of these exit polls we're seeing. We showed, as you were talking about the economy, that Virginia voters, based on these early exits, and again, we'll have vote data in 7.5 minutes here. So we'll be, starting to get vote data after polls close in 7.5 minutes. But when you look at the exits here, economy was a huge issue for Virginia voters. And then you look at some of the shutdown questions, or at least let me call them the federal government cuts questions. The exit polls did not specifically ask about the government shutdown. They did ask about those, the so-called RIFs, those layoffs, the federal government cuts, for example. And you saw that for some voters, it was a factor. In Northern Virginia, for example, I'm thinking of, over by Hampton Roads, et cetera. How do you see that nexus in a state like Virginia, which has 147,000 federal civilian employees, second most of any state in the country?
Yeah, and great question. And you can't. I live in Northern Virginia. You cannot go out and someone doesn't come up to you that I've been furloughed. I have no income. How am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to put groceries on the table? And that is the big issue as we go forward. And the big issue is going to be Republicans here in Virginia. Now, one Republican in our state, one elected official has had the courage to take on Donald Trump and to say, no, the DOGE cuts were wrong. No, cutting the SNAP benefits were wrong. No, all these federal government contracts you cut were wrong. Now, one of them has the courage to take on Donald. They're so scared of him, and they've been weak. And our economy has suffered greatly, as I mentioned. And we want elected officials who will stand up and do the right thing. Shame on the Republicans in Virginia, all of the statewide elected officials and the members of Congress who have been so terrified of Donald Trump that they will not say, no, these cuts were wrong and you need to stop it. But they're terrified of him. And I think that's the message as we go forward into 2026. Who's willing to step up for their citizens and their voters and take on Donald Trump and say you're wrong? The tariffs are wrong. The cuts are wrong, the DOGE cuts were wrong, and now government shutdown is wrong. And I think that's going to be the message going forward. I'm fighting for you. I'm not fighting for Donald Trump. I didn't run for Donald Trump. I ran for you. And that's the message for our party going forward in 2026.
Worth noting, too, though, that, Governor Youngkin, he's not unpopular in the state of Virginia, to the point that you're making here. Governor Terry McAuliffe, Gov, where are you going to be tonight? Where are you watching the results roll in? On NBC News, I assume.
I'm going to be up here in Northern Virginia doing some radio and TV, but listen, Governor Youngkin's underwater. He's under 50%. No governor's ever been under 50% leaving office. And the reason is he sucked up to Donald Trump and refused to do the right thing for the citizens of the Commonwealth of Virginia. It's disgraceful.
Governor Terry McAuliffe, former governor of Virginia, thank you very much for being on the show.
Great.
We appreciate it as our election coverage rolls on. Thanks, sir. Let me bring in Hogan Gidley, Ashley Etienne back. Let me also bring in Ryan Nobles, who is at one of the locations. I think you're in Richmond, right, Ryan? You're at Spanberger campaign headquarters. Here we are, 4 minutes until polls close. I see the room maybe starting to fill up behind you. Could be just reporters. I can't tell. Give us a sense of what it's like where you are.
Yeah, they haven't quite opened the doors yet to rank-and-file supporters of Abigail Spanberger. We see a lot of elected officials have arrived. The Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan has arrived. The Speaker of the Virginia House of Delegates, Don Scott, has also arrived. And he said very boisterously to the group of assembled reporters that he sees a Democratic sweep across the board tonight. And that he is expecting to expand his margins in the House of Delegates, much of which you heard the former governor tell you as well. And that's been pretty consistent, Hallie, from the Democrats that I've talked to, not only publicly, but privately as well. They do remain cautiously optimistic, even, I would say, cautiously confident about the results here tonight. They feel as though the economic message that Spanberger has focused in on has really resonated with Virginia voters. And of course, these are always local elections, but the government shutdown uniquely impacts the voters of Virginia. And Spanberger has really tied in to that message and explaining how she would respond as governor of Virginia to this shutdown in perhaps ways differently than what Glenn Youngkin has done, which is not necessarily criticize the Trump administration or try and find ways to help out federal government workers who have lost their jobs as a result of the Trump cuts, and then, of course, are furloughed or are working without pay because of the shutdown. So Democrats remain confident here tonight as those polls close in the next couple of minutes. We'll have to see if that confidence bears itself out, Hallie.
Also worth noting, as we've talked about the degree of any kind of so-called Trump factor in some of these races, including in Virginia, that President Trump stopped short of endorsing, of course, the Republican candidate in this race, Winsome Earl-Sears, at a tele-rally, didn't mention her name. And they've had a bit of a, I don't know, semi-complicated history dating back over the last few years.
Yeah. Hallie, it is such a good point because even in areas where Donald Trump isn't necessarily popular, it is impossible for a Republican to win at all without a full-throated endorsement from Donald Trump. Because if Donald Trump doesn't endorse your campaign and you are a Trump supporter, there's a very good chance that you're just going to stay home. And I saw some estimates that if Earl-Sears had any shot at winning tonight, that she needed to draw in 75, 80% of the Trump voters that came out in 2024. And you remember Donald Trump lost in Virginia in 2024, but it was by a closer margin than he had lost in 2020. So there was some sense that perhaps Republicans were making gains. But if you don't have Donald Trump wrapping your arm around your candidate, and their relationship, you're absolutely right, has been complicated. She was very critical of Donald Trump. After he lost the election in 2020, she did come around and has kind of tried to connect herself to him and tie herself to him, but it just hasn't worked. Trump has never really bought into it. And the fact that he would hold a rally and kind of rally, a tele-rally, and strongly get behind the other candidates on the ballot and not even mention her name speaks volumes. And it's something that Trump supporters would be keenly aware of.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt that it could impact the results here tonight.
Ryan Noble's live for us there in Richmond. Ryan, thank you. In the 30 seconds we have left, Hogan and Ashley, in a sentence here, what are you most watching for in the state of Virginia?
I'm looking to see some of Southern Virginia that actually does go for Republicans, how much they come out in support of Earl-Sears, and I don't know that they will.
What her margins are.
Well, and I'm glad you said that because I'm getting reporting from the ground right now from the National Governors Association basically saying that turnout in southwestern Virginia that was critical to Youngkin winning is down, lowest turnout in the state that they've seen.
We will find out in about 30 seconds, of course, when polls close in Virginia. That does it for us for this hour, but we've got special coverage of election night picking up right now.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.